Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Thank you very much, Ashok, as Director of ICS, for having invited me to moderate today's session with Dr. Hemant Adlakha. Hemant is a prolific writer, speaks fluent Chinese, and has worked extensively on various aspects of China's internal developments as well as external issues, but his particular focus is on literature. Hemant, in fact, makes a very interesting comment in one of his many writings. He says, literature is the best way to understand contemporary China. A very intriguing thought, but I'm sure he will come to it at some point in his conversation. I will not say too much about what Hemant may or may not discuss. I really don't have any profound thoughts to express at this stage of the process. I simply want to repeat a point I made just a couple of minutes back, that the procedure is after Hemant finishes his 20-minute talk, and 20 minutes it is, please, I will put maybe a couple of questions and Hemant would give me one single consolidated reply. After that, Jyoti will come in as the senior editor at The Print, our co-host for the event. Jyoti's questions will be answered by Hemant, and then two of Hemant's friends, young associates, I think Tanvi Negi and Dr. Usha perhaps, will put their questions. And then we have requested 4 people who are under 35 to please come forward with their questions. We will identify them through the chat box where they would preface their question with a little sign U-35. And after those 4 questions, the floor would be open. Basically, Hemant would reply to the general questions from the under 35s and the floor in lots of 3 each. That is, 3 questions would be taken up for a single consolidated reply. The effort is to move the discussion along and to have a maximum number of people speak, put their questions as they wish. And as Jyoti requested a little while back, the questioner should please have their video on, and when their name is called, please unmute the microphone and speak up. So with these few words, I thank once again ICS and The Print for hosting the event, and especially Dr. Hemant Adlakha for the presentation he is about to make. Hemant, you have the floor now, please, for 20 minutes. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Ambassador Rana. Thank you for your very generous introduction. Time is very limited, but nevertheless, I must thank ICS Director, Ambassador Ashok Kantha, and also the young team which brings week after week this wonderful virtual get-together through these webinars. I also must thank Ambassador Shiv Shankar Menon and again Ambassador Rana. I had written my first article on Fang Fang 2 months ago, a little more than 2 months ago. And I received a few of the very early comments from Ambassador Menon and Ambassador Rana. And their comments were actually very encouraging, which then convinced me to pursue this Fang Fang, which later on now is being called Fang Fang phenomena, to its full details. Because the first article which I had written on 23rd of March or something, at that time, it appeared to be only a local phenomena, local in the sense that only in China, it was being talked about and it had become controversial. But subsequently, as the days went by, the debate triggered by the Fang Fang's Wuhan diary became more and more inclusive of almost everything under the sky, which you can discuss in China, either directly as an outcome of the COVID-19 or even prior to that, what has been happening in China. So if I look back now for the, let's say 100 days of Fang Fang diary, or even 100 days, a little more than 100 days of the Chinese epidemic, then it's very easy to divide these last 100 days or a little over 3 months into 3 phases. The first phase was from 25th of January to 7th of April. 7th of April because that is the time when the Wuhan authorities had announced that the Wuhan lockdown will be now gradually lifted. And the second phase then begins from 8th of April. And I call it a second phase from 8th April to 8th May, because 8th April was the day when the formal lifting of the lockdown had begun. And also on that day, the first news broke out about Wuhan Diary being published in English translation by HarperCollins, and a big advertisement, or the pre-sale advertisement of the book, had come out on Amazon.com. That changed the face of the debate in China, and I'll talk about it how. And the third phase is from 8th of May, and now we are in the third phase of the debate now, because in the third phase, for the first time, I've noticed that the Chinese, one of the top ranking officials, has joined the debate and mounted a fierce attack, not only on Fang Fang, but on public intellectuals in China. So that is the third aspect, and that is the most dangerous aspect of this whole Fang Fang phenomena, which I'll talk about. Now, to come back to the beginning of the first phase onwards, but before I begin, I would like to share on a lighter note something which will give you an idea also that how the Fang Fang debate has actually now become part of everyday life for everyone in China, especially the younger professionals and younger university researchers, professors, etc. On the WeChat, there is this sample questionnaire being circulated, especially among younger Chinese professionals who are looking for a suitable match for marriage. And this questionnaire consists of 10 questions related to Fang Fang. And the questionnaire then says that if you get 3 wrong answers from your would-be spouse, if you get 3 wrong answers, that means the match is not suitable for you. So, this is becoming very popular on the WeChat and other social media platforms in China. Anyway, to go back to the real debate and the serious issue, I mean, many Chinese commentators have actually written about it, and they're raising this question that why should Fang Fang or Fang Fang diary become an issue at all in the first place? And one of the reasons which has come out during the debate is that Fang Fang, whether she is right or whether she is wrong, or whether her 60 pages diary is all lies and rumors and hearsay and fabricated fiction, etc., as her critics are attacking her and saying, some people are saying that would have, the question of authenticity or not would have settled down on its own. There was no need to blow this entire thing into such a big debate. But then some people have also quoted a Chinese proverb which says that if the wind is flowing non-stop, then can the tree be still? And that is how they begin the debate. Because everyone who is writing comments or articles or their observations on the Fang Fang diary or Wuhan diary as it is called, they're all saying, now the question is not being raised anymore whether one has read the diary or not. The question also is no more relevant whether what she has written in her diary is fact or fiction. The larger question is that why she has become the target of attack, especially by especially the cyberbullying, and which has, I mean, I for the last 2 months, almost on average every day, I'm accessing or I'm receiving through WeChat groups at least 10 articles every day. And if I look back at the past 3 months of what are the main issues on which China is debating, then there are three constants and which are not changing from being debated in the past 3 months. First, of course, is US and the West versus China. Before COVID, it was trade war, and since COVID-19, it is COVID-19, US, West versus China. And the second issue is of Fangfang. And the third issue is of China's economic recovery. And these three have become constants in the past 3 months. Now, on the Fangfang phenomena, as I said, that if I divide into 3 phases, the first phase is from 25th January, when the first page of the diary was uploaded by Fangfang. I'm sorry, I did not actually go into the background, introducing the background about Fangfang. I thought that by now, because Indian print media and electronic media has been carrying news about Fangfang for the past 3 months. So I hope that at least everyone has read something or the other about Fangfang. But if not, for the benefit of some of the participants who may not actually know who is Fangfang and what is the Fangfang phenomena background, I may actually quickly give you a brief outline. Fangfang is Wuhan-based writer. She's in her mid-60s, and she spent her childhood and early childhood during the Great Leap Forward times, and then she spent her teenage years and early adulthood during the Cultural Revolution decade. Before joining Wuhan University as perhaps among the first graduates in China after the Cultural Revolution to enroll into a university in 1978. And then she finished her graduation in 82. And since then, she has been holding jobs like she was in Wuhan television as editor, and then where she worked for several years. And then she started writing fiction in the early 80s. She is a very accomplished and award-winning writer in China. She's won almost China's all prestigious literary awards, including the Lushun Literary Award. But she has her history, she has her past, and she is not actually a Communist Party member. That is also one of the issues which has been very important aspect of the debate. And for 6 to 7 years, she was also in a position of president of the Writers Association of Hubei province, which in China is considered to be very much part of the establishment and also almost an official face of the Chinese establishment. And she has, for example, she became very notoriously famous recently in 2016 when her novel Soft Burial was published by one of China's top publishing houses, that is People's Literature Publishing House. But she immediately faced attack by Maoist and the leftist intellectuals in China. And under that pressure, despite having won a prestigious literary award for her book Soft Burial, but which actually critically questions the land reform in the 1950s in China. So she was fiercely attacked by Chinese Maoists and leftists and accusing her of negating the Chinese revolutionary legacy and Chinese Communist Party's legacy and Mao's legacy, etc. So under that pressure, her novel was banned within 1 year of its publication. So she and many of the critics and those who are attacking Fang Fang today for the diary she has written, many of these scholars or intellectuals, they actually are the same people who had also attacked her for writing the novel Soft Burial. So this is a brief background. So coming back to her diaries, on January 25th, she wrote her first page of the diary, and there was nothing. I mean, nobody took notice of it other than some people in Wuhan who were regular visitors of her chat on her blog post on WeChat. But suddenly then, on 7th of February, if you have followed the news of COVID-19 in China, 7th is a very important date because on 7th of February, the whistleblower Dr. Li Wenliang passed away. He succumbed to his, he was infected with the virus and he succumbed on 7th of February. And on that day, Fang Fang had written a post paying tributes to Li Wenliang. And that post was struck down by the censor authorities. And the next day was the first attacking article which appeared on one of the leftist websites. So it's very important to note here that from 25th of January up to 7th of February, there was nothing, there was no hell broke loose because of Fang Fang's diary. And suddenly from 7th February onwards, there was like flood of articles on various websites, especially the leftist websites, attacking Fang Fang. One is not yet very clear what provoked these attacks. The only two possible answers which one can think of is one, that many people accused her of only creating and spreading rumors and lies because she was not privy to actually what was happening in Wuhan. She was also locked down like millions of others in Wuhan. So whatever she was writing in her post was on the basis of the information she was getting from within her neighborhood or from her friends in the media or her friends in the medical community. So, and she was continuously questioning the negligence on the part of the Wuhan authorities or the insensitivity on the part of the Wuhan authorities, because in the early phase, as all of us know now, what we have read in the media also, it was a chaotic situation in Wuhan, and some people have put in their blogs, which was repeated by Fang Fang by repeating those blogs on her blog post, that in central Wuhan hospital, for example, people were heard screaming at the medical staff for the exorbitant cost of a ventilator, for example. Initial, those people tell me that if somebody wanted to be put on the ventilator, then they were told that the cost is 60,000 yuan. That roughly converted into Indian rupees would be 6 lakh rupees. And in fact, one blogger wrote also on the blog post that, is this a ventilator? Is this a life-saving machine? Or is it a money guzzler? So these kind of reactions were coming from all across of lack of proper medical facilities and medical attention, etc., etc. So this was on the one hand. On the other hand, the second possible explanation or answer which one finds of the sudden spike in attacks on Fang Fang was the fact that this diary was written by Fang Fang. Had somebody else written it, perhaps it would not have made much of an issue. So that is the second aspect of it. Now, quickly coming to the second phase, which I said earlier, begins from 7th of April or 8th of April, because that is when the news came out that the Fang Fang diary, as it is called, and various names are being given to it in China. Fang Fang diary or quarantine diary or Wuhan diary, which is the now official name it has got. And that it is being published in America by HarperCollins, and also German translations and the French translations are going to come out soon. But before that, there was already news that in Taiwan, somebody had put together all the 60 pieces and put them on the internet in Chinese. So that went unnoticed. But the moment this news came of HarperCollins, suddenly the nature of attack on Wuhan changed. And now she was being accused of a traitor, of anti-national, a foreign powers agent, etc., etc. And some commentators also use that by going overseas with her Wuhan diary, she has given ammunition to the foreign powers to mount their attack more energetically against China. All kinds of things. She was also then called, accused of being an American agent, and America was her spiritual fatherland, etc., etc. The third phase then comes from 8th of May onwards, because if you see the nature and the frequency of attacks on Fang Fang diary on various outlets, as I mentioned, then it's very clear that by now it was not the diary itself, or it was not Fang Fang herself as the agent provocateur for these attacks, but the issue was bigger. There was a larger issue, and that the party establishment or the Chinese authorities, what they had thought initially, that by intimidating Fang Fang or by these attacks on Fang Fang, that she would be tamed or she will become subdued. But actually the opposite. Every time somebody who had some credentials attacked Fang Fang, instead of keeping quiet, Fang Fang shot back, and she decided in fighting back. And it's very interesting that during these 2 months before the phase 3 begins, throughout she was interviewed by the official media outlets in China. And that is again something which people are raising questions, that why was it that when on the one hand the censoring authorities were deleting her post or removing her post from the WeChat or Weibo, the Chinese official media outlets continued to interview her.
And Hemant, you have 2 minutes, please.
Okay. The time runs so fast. Anyway, so now quickly come to the third phase, which is that by now, I think the Chinese authorities were clueless in the sense that what is to be done with Fang Fang phenomena. And now, on 8th of May, the Deputy Education Minister of China, he held a meeting at Beijing's Teachers Normal University, which there are all indications that Beijing's normal teachers is going to be the battleground in the coming days, in this battle of ideas. I call it battle of ideas because Xinhua News Agency and China Academy of Social Sciences, Communist Youth League Daily, and China Central Disciplinary Commission, etc. All these state apparatus have now come together and decided to take on all those who are standing in support of Fang Fang. And almost every day reports are coming that university professors and public intellectuals are being either put under investigation or being taken action against for their improper speech. And what is the improper speech? That they are writing on their blogs supporting Fang Fang or supporting Fang Fang diary. So since my time is up, I'll conclude by reading out a comment from a very ardent fan of Fang Fang diary, who has likened Fang Fang to a woodpecker and said, like a woodpecker, she keeps pecking at the wood forever, not in order to topple the tree, but to help the tree to grow straight. So I think I'll stop here, and perhaps during the question and answer session, also take up what Ambassador Rana had earlier said, that why it is important to look at literature to understand China. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hemant. You have given a masterful overview which reflects your own personal, the depth of your own knowledge of this subject. I have two interrelated questions. The first is that by publishing abroad, Fang Fang in effect gives ammunition to what is long been a strong sentiment in China, that people should not hit at China via the shoulders of foreign countries. And you know, there is a long history to this of people who have written abroad or written in English in order really to have their comments conveyed or relayed back to China through the West. I think this will probably hurt her. On a larger canvas, this is a struggle between, and that's my second question, on a larger canvas, this is a struggle between repression in an authoritarian society which insists on one single official narrative of what is culture. And culture has always been of enormous importance to China, as your research and many other writings have shown. There is a struggle between that official narrative and those who want to speak out and speak the truth as they see it, in this particular case, through literature. How will this play out in the long run? I don't know how you see this in terms of what impact it may have in China a year from now or 5 years from now. Please respond, and then we will go to Jyoti, who has her questions as well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your questions, Ambassador Rana. I'll quickly try to address them. About the overseas publication, yes, I mean, you have rightly pointed out that there is, Chinese are very sentimental and touchy about going up.
Please mute your microphones if you're not speaking. Sorry, Hemant.
No, it's okay. Let me point out here that what we see in the media, that the news of her overseas publication of Wuhan Diary actually might either hurt her or might take away some of the support group which she has. On 23rd and 24th of April, some agencies in China, they had conducted a 2-day survey on WeChat with 2 questions. And first question was that, what do you think of the Wuhan Diaries overseas publication? And the second question was, what do you think of Fang Fang? And nearly 2 lakh participants were there in these 2 days WeChat survey. And to my surprise, and I'm sure to the surprise of many, and you of course, out of 200,000 people who participated in the survey, nearly 80% gave thumbs up sign for the overseas publication. And they said that why not? And the second about this Fang Fang, because as I said, that the attacks on Fang Fang in China by what is being called now by the, those who are indulging in the cyberbullying, they're being called the party 5 cents intellectual, or party's troll army, or nationalist mob, etc., etc. Even they now admit, it's very confusing sometimes, even they now admit that what she wrote in her diaries, by questioning this systemic negligence or bureaucratic failure, etc., they admit that initial phase, that was fine. They don't have any issues with that. But now they've taken up this as the main issue, that why is she going abroad with her publication. But as I said, that the survey participants, nearly overwhelming support was that they see no problem with she going overseas with her publication. That is one. Second, actually, she has clarified in one of her blog posts that uh, she had no intention, or she had not taken any initiative to go to with her publication. I'm forgetting the name. She has a permanent translator, American translator, who has translated all her works from Chinese into English earlier. It was he who took the initiative of collecting these 60 days chronicles and decided to translate them into English. But before he approached Fang Fang, Fang Fang has said that on 25th of January itself, she was approached and interviewed by the editor of one of China's leading literary journal called Harvest, which has a 100,000 and subscription in China. They had approached Fang Fang and offered her to write down the Wuhan Chronicles. And for some reason that did not work out. So she decided in any way to continue what she felt like writing. So that is to clarify that she is not actually directly involved in the overseas publication.
Okay.
But at the same time, to coming back to your quickly second question about this cultural narrative, yes, of course. I mean, I mentioned in my abstract also, and I've been maintaining all along in the past 2 decades in my analysis of China, Chinese politics, etc., that we have to begin reading literature, because literature is the only, or the cultural discourse is the only channel or the medium where you will find all these issues. I mean, Chinese politics is discussed in literature and culture, not in political science textbooks, etc.
Hemant, thank you. I think you're taking a slightly different track from my question, which was what is likely to shape up a year or 5 years from today. But we can put that aside. I don't want to continue endlessly on this. May I now give the floor to Jyoti to pose her questions, and maybe these points will come out again. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Jyoti.
Jyoti, you have to unmute. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't follow my own instructions. Thank you so much, Ambassador Rana. Let me just quickly introduce myself. I'm Jyoti Malhotra. I work with the print, and we are deeply honored with this partnership with ICS. So thank you so much, Ambassador Kanta. And Hemant, that was a very, very interesting first few comments, and look forward to many more. My first question to you is about this battle of ideas that you were talking about. But I want to ask you about the battle of ideas inside China. There was this very interesting New York Times piece recently, which talked about how young people on the Weibo chat room are so taken up with the Fang Fang diary, with what this woman wrote, is that they're sort of pouring their hearts out to her, you know, both to her and also to this doctor who died, Li Wenliang. And you know, to Li, for example, somebody says, hope the sky wherever you are or is as blue as it is today in Wuhan. And somebody else says, you know, my boyfriend, I have a boyfriend, Dr. Li, should I marry him? And someone says, you know, here is this bowl of wonderful, whatever the food is. So the question is, you know, Fang Fang writes this diary about the people in Wuhan and the life she sees around her. So what is happening inside China? What are people, young people, debating these days?
Okay. Thank you, Jyoti. Yeah. See, this battle of ideas, since I had limited time, I did not elaborate on this. But as I said earlier, the debate which has now become Fang Fang phenomena, the debate is not so much about Fang Fang or the diary in itself. The debate has now reached on a bigger canvas. And the continuous popularity and the expanding support on the social media, which Fang Fang has been receiving, that was something which the party establishment did not expect or did not anticipate in the first place. Now, I'll have to go back to 2013. 2013, Xi Jinping had called a meeting of the, he was also then made the president or the chairman of the National Security Commission. And he had called the first meeting of the National Security Commission officials. And he had outlined 7 major threats which China is facing. And this is now known as the Central Document number 9. And the first of the 7 threats was the Western liberal ideas and free press. And so this has to be seen in that context, because I think what has hit the Chinese establishment with the unanticipated popularity of Fang Fang is that it, I mean, as I mentioned somewhere else, Fang Fang is not a typical dissident, and she is not questioning or she is not actively campaigning against the Communist Party rule or against socialism, etc., like many other well-known dissidents have been doing. So this is something I think is unprecedented. Many pro-party commentators have also admitted that. And they have said that party has no clue how to deal with this phenomenon, because one, it completely not only contradicts, it buries the establishment narrative on what actually happened or did not happen in Wuhan.
Hemant, you will have to keep your responses a little brief, if I may suggest.
Okay.
Otherwise, we'll not be able to get through many questions.
Okay, so I'll wind up my response to this question now with giving an example of, Albert Camus' The Plague. The sale of Albert Camus' Plague in Chinese has soared in the last 3 months. And this is a very good indication. And Albert Camus had become very famous during the resistance era, because he was also the editor of the resistance journal Combat. And somebody had written that the readers of the journal Combat, they had formed a habit of getting everyday thoughts and ideas by reading Camus' editorials. I will say that the 60 pages of this Wuhan diary have actually played the similar role in China. And people have said with tears in their eyes that the last thing they expect to do before going to bed is read the next page of the diary. So I'll stop here and wait.
Yeah, but Hemant, the question is, why is this happening? Why are people weeping over her diary? Why is the sale of Albert Camus' Plague novel going up? What's going on inside China?
Because
Hemant, a brief reply, please.
Yeah, because people immediately, especially the Wuhan residents, they very easily identify with what is written in the diary as what is reality. And they don't identify that with the official narrative.
Okay.
Great.
Right. My third question is about, the crisis that we are facing in India. So it's an India-China question. So in India, we see, you talked about the freedom of the press, well, relative freedom of the press in India, when people talking about the migrants, in thousands and lakhs going back home, and the conditions under which this is happening. Now, Fang Fang was perhaps one of the few who was talking about the conditions inside China, right? But my question is, why should I care? So why should it matter? If my material needs are being taken care of, which is what China was able to do to its own people, then should freedom of speech, it's the old question, should freedom of speech and dissent be subservient to your material needs?
It's both actually, and I'll relate my response to this question to the previous one also. that it's not just a question of that my material needs are met, so why should I bother? Actually, what I said earlier, in the early phase of Wuhan crisis or Wuhan epidemic, and that continued even later also. But unfortunately, we don't have enough information. And so Fang Fang is not alone. There have been many other people also who have been arrested also. There have been people's journalists who have been arrested.
During this
During this time,
outbreak, during the coronavirus outbreak.
During this outbreak, there was another journalist, not even journalist, he was just a salesperson with a company, and he happened to shoot the video at one of the Wuhan's main crematorium, where he saw long queues of people coming there to cremate their near and dear ones. And that video he put on the WeChat, and he is now behind bars because that contradicts the official account of how many deaths or how many people lost their near and dear ones. So there is
Thank you, Hemant. Can we now please, Jyoti, move on to the questions from the two people that Hemant had specially designated. Usha has a question. Dr. Usha from JNU, I understand. Her question is, apparently her microphone is not working. I'm intrigued by the author's choice of diary entry form of expression literature. Though personal, it has been sent out there for public gaze and consumption. It does not seem to be a direct analysis or review. Perhaps this mode has been chosen by the author in the hopes that she will not be pinned down, though she is well aware that she will not be spared. Or is it that the daily ordeal and suffering of the whole city is being recorded in the form of a diary entry? Does that make sense? Could it possibly be for some other reason? Perhaps this is a desperate mode of expression in desperate times by desperate people. Your brief response, please, Hemant.
Okay, as I think I have already addressed this question earlier, but let me come back to it. As I said, Fang Fang is essentially a writer, and she is a writer who does not hold back her words. And in one of the interviews, she had said that by any standard, she does not consider herself as a most well-behaved person. And she's very blunt. And under the lockdown, the kind of reports or the kind of information which she was getting from various sources, I think the writer within her became restless. And she started then putting it in her blog of what she was hearing of this kind of sufferings and the kind of agony and the everyday pain which the various accounts she was receiving, people were suffering during the early phase. So I think that is what triggered. But of course, the critiques have also said, if it's a diary, if it is Fang Fang diary, the diary is meant to be a personal diary, why is she making it public? But I think that's too narrow way of looking at it. What she has already clarified, that her only purpose in writing her blog, and which she herself later on said that she was surprised to see the popularity that blog received. And it was not she who called it a diary. It was her followers who actually started it, calling it a diary after 10 or 12 diary entries were posted on the blog.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Hemant. There is apparently a Tanvi Negi, who has also been designated by Hemant as someone who has a question. Tanvi, can you take the floor, please?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you, sir. It was a very interesting lecture. I was looking forward to it. I have a very short question, and I will not take much of your time because I can see that we are a little short on time. I am trying to steer the discussion a little away from what we have been doing for some time. I'm looking at the whole translation of Wuhan's diary, of Fang Fang's diary, and looking at translation as a political process. Now, translation of Wuhan diary, Fang Fang's diary, as you mentioned that she was already in conversation with Michael Berry. Michael Berry, who's a translator, has translated, is a well-known translator of contemporary Chinese literary works. And he had approached her long before the whole controversy started to translate this into English. But then now it has become a whole political agenda. So how much of the motive behind the translation was political, and now that it is on Amazon as pre-sale ad, how much of it is, just purely an economic, motive behind it? Because now that she is a worldwide phenomena, like you mentioned, Fang Fang phenomena, then people would be more interested in buying it. So quite of it could be just an economic, gain, or how much of it is political. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hemant, please.
You see, even if it is for economic gain, so let us not complain about it, because we all know how capitalism works.
Yes, sir.
At one level. But at another level, critics in China have actually singled out two celebrities in China, whom the critics of Fang Fang are saying that they are the mastermind behind the 60-page Wuhan Diary itself and its overseas publication. And you will be surprised to know that one of the two persons being accused of helping Fang Fang to go overseas is none other than the Global Times editor Hu Shijin, and who has been now facing a lot of criticisms by especially the so-called nationalist mob. And the other person is, there seems to be some credibility in that accusation, because when Fang Fang's WeChat blog post was blocked, then it is the financial news magazine Caixin which actually came forward, and which then reposted all her WeChat blogs of diary. And she is very well known. She's actually known as the Iron Lady of Chinese media, and she has been the editor of Caixin for last 10 years. Her name is Hu Shuli. So these are the two people who are being accused of working behind the overseas publication of Wuhan Diary, and also bringing together the 60 pages under Wuhan Diary as one collection of her chronicles. So I think I'll stop here at this.
Thank you very much, Hemant. Okay, now we have questions in the under 35 category, and I'm delighted that 4 people have come forward. First of all, it's Mr. Ahmed Khurshid who has the floor. He'd be followed by Mr. Saurabh Verma, and then Mr. Raj Gupta. Would the 3 of you please, in quick succession, pose your questions so that Hemant can give one single consolidated reply to enable us to move forward. Mr. Khurshid, please.
Hello, sir. So, as you have mentioned, Fang Fang has been accused of being an American agent because of her American spirituality. So, my question is that China today is more globalized and more confident than ever. It has also become more hostile to foreign ideas. Suspicious that there are Western designs to stop China's rise. And so, what are your thoughts on that?
Great. The next question comes from Mr. Saurabh Verma. Mr. Saurabh Verma, please. Saurabh Verma, can you unmute your microphone? Okay, while you're doing this, we can go to Mr. Raj Gupta. Mr. Raj Gupta, if you're ready, can you put your question, please?
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. Raj Gupta?
Not audible.
Not clear.
Everybody. All right. So my question is, I was trying to contrast it.
Carry on, please.
Hello?
Carry on.
Hello?
Please speak up. You're being heard. Don't
Can I go
worry.
ahead? Yeah. I was trying to contrast the Fang Fang phenomena with the Kuo Chao. Recently, there has been surge in nativism all throughout most countries in the world, in the post-COVID world, looking inwards, looking towards internal manufacturing and whatnot, globalization, curtailing of globalization, as the economist talks about. So a lot of propaganda media, the mouthpiece media from China also talks about looking inwards. And then we have something called the Fang Fang phenomenon. This lady who is being labeled as a dissident. So in the light of this, people who also, so how would this phenomena of anybody being labeled as dissident along with the surge in nativism exacerbate this labeling of a foreign agent? It would, it looks like it will exacerbate, exaggerate, increase the momentum of this, and will it from my side.
Thank you very much. Is Mr. Saurabh Verma available?
Yeah, that was me.
Oh, that's Saurabh Verma. Okay, then Mr. Raj Gupta. I don't, let me locate a question, sorry. Raj Gupta. Sorry, he has not, his question is not visible to me. Yes. China's cyber nationalists, coupled with the state's machinery of censorship, was still not enough to subdue Fang Fang's diary, and it still enjoys readership and support. Till what extent can this wide-ranging support to Fang Fang be seen as something of a formidable force against the regime? Hemant, can you please respond to all three questions in one lot? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the three questions. In fact, all the three are definitely under 35 and all three have been my students. And Raj Gupta just...
So it's a private racket actually.
No, I don't know. I did not know that they have registered or something. But very good questions indeed. And I'll try to combine the three questions and answer in a consolidated way. That foreign agent or propaganda dissident, or how it is going to affect the political dynamics in China. Well, my quick answer would be that it is a usual tactic which the authoritarian rule, whether in China or elsewhere, or authoritarian governments, they choose to adopt in order to, distract the main issues of the day. And I see the Fang Fang debate being snowballed into such a big issue is also one way of the Chinese establishment trying to divert attention from the actual real issues. And after the initial success, I think they started realizing that they're not succeeding in containing the support which the Fang Fang or the Fang Fang, they call it Fang Fang and Fang Fang ilk. That is how they are described in China now. That is at one level. At another level, that despite such a strong censor authorities, etc., how Fang Fang was allowed to, go on like that. Well, my answer to that is that now it is very apparent. Earlier, Jyoti also had said that what is this battle of ideas? That with the internet, because unlike 1989 Tiananmen Square, I think since 1989, this is the first time that the party establishment is faced with something like this, which is an alternative opinion or an alternative voice, which is not only contradicting and challenging the party narrative, but is getting huge support and popularity. That has become a worrisome thing. For example, one WeChat blogger had written that let us be very clear that we are no more a silent majority in China now. And if the Communist Party has 90 million members, then we are, it is 1 million to 10 million. We are 900 million internet users in China. So that is in response to why the party's censorship has not been able to subdue Fang Fang and something. And third, the larger issue, which I had said, battle of ideas, that as I mentioned earlier, that only last week, actually that was the 100th day of the marking the death of Dr. Li Wenliang. And on that day, 8 Chinese ministries have come together, led by the Education Ministry, and they have issued a new directive to all the universities and institutes of higher education of how to implement the education and ideological agenda of the party. And the topmost item on that directive issued by the 8 ministries is directed at those professors, those intellectuals, those artists, those writers who are raising these questions. In fact, the document goes on to say that if these are the kind of faculties we have, that what kind of students will be produced from these higher education institutions. I think we can see the echo or resonance of something which we have been complaining or fighting against in our own situation here.
Thank you. Thank you, Hemant. You've given a set of very, very wide-ranging responses, which we should all appreciate. Vijay, would you please take the floor, to be followed by Saurabh Kumar, who was, I think, the second initially to raise his hand, and then his hand disappeared and he became number 4. But Saurabh is the second questioner from the general audience. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to talk, I wanted to refer to what the situation regarding the Chinese diaspora around the world is and how they have reacted to this Fang Fang event, particularly from Hemant's paper. It looked as if much of the reaction that he mentions is from the USA and North America, except for 2 references, one of a person called Puching Lian from London, and of course the last report of the woodpecker, which is apparently Japan. There aren't any references to the diaspora reaction from Europe, Japan, Australia. Of course, Taiwan is different. I just wanted to understand what the resonance among the diaspora is.
Thank you. And the third question comes from Saurabh Kumar. Saurabh, would you please take the floor?
Thank you. Thank you very much. My apologies if the hand disappeared. That happened earlier also. When we came in, I greeted everybody. It wasn't heard, perhaps. Thank you very much, Professor Adlakha. Most fascinating presentation, and I read your articles too, which is in elaboration. My question is, pardon the ignorance, because it's not the talk or the phenomenon, but it's the larger scene in China, which one is ignorant of because not following the things so at all in detail. So same thing as others have asked, how do we understand what this all means? Jyoti had raised and others. You see, my problem is I seek your help in putting it in perspective. The extreme left constituency that is referred to in your article, in your diary, as in the Maoist websites, which were the ones to pick up the gauntlet right in the beginning. The conflation of these with nationalists, quote unquote, how does that go? I don't figure out. I mean, you see, extreme left, there is a constituency. They would be the ones unhappy with the present dispensation for being anything but Maoist. Now, here is somebody else from another angle who is not well up with the establishment, but by no means left so criticizing. But the nationalist conflation, who does or how? Because that doesn't gel with this.
Thank you. I think
in that context is related. Sorry, just not very long more. Is there anything of, you see, distinction between nationalism and patriotism in China in the debate? Min Suu Kyi and Ai Kuo-Chui, has any bearing here? Who is labeling whom is the thing really? And finally, are these debates in the press also? Or only on website?
Thank you very much.
And social media? Because that also has a bearing on where it is. Is it out in the open, in the press?
Thank you, Hemant. Hemant, would you respond, please?
Yeah. Thank you for the set of 3 questions. Well, about the Tiananmen Square repeat, as I mentioned earlier, it has already started. And in the last 2 weeks in particular, every day, some action or the other is being taken against by the employers or the university authorities or research institutions against their own professors and researchers for speaking out openly or writing in their blog post in support of Fang Fang. That has happened, and that is happening, and that is expanding every day. So exact numbers is very difficult to cite, but that process has begun where action is being taken against those who are not welcome by the establishment. So as far as Tiananmen Square repeat is concerned, it will depend if there is out on the streets some kind of an opposition or some kind of a massive support for Fang Fang, etc. But I will not be surprised, because I'm already wondering why, in the name of improper speech, the action is being taken against well-known, well-established, with great credentials, scholars and intellectuals and university professors all over China. It's not just confined to one university or the other. I mean, in Beijing also, as I said in the beginning, that Beijing's teachers normal university, in the coming days we will see, will become the battleground of this battle of ideas, because that university refused to implement the new directives of taking action against their own professors. And that's something which even Fang Fang yesterday wrote a blog post asking other universities to follow the example of Beijing Teachers Normal University and not give in to the diktats of the education ministry or the establishment. So that's very interesting. And about Tiananmen Square, I remember, Professor G.P. Deshpande, who was earlier ICS director also, and against the discomfort of his own Marxist peers and Marxist colleagues, he had written in his columns in EPW on Tiananmen Square. And I remember, and I quote actually him, and he had written that whatever has happened in Tiananmen Square is not socialism. And then he had referred to Deng Xiaoping's famous slogan of if the cat catches mice, it doesn't matter whether it is black or white. And to that, G.P. Deshpande had raised a question, asked a question to the Chinese through his columns. He's saying that the cat has killed the students. And if you say that has happened because the cat is red, it is not a patently tenable argument. He had written open about it. And coming back to the Ambassador Saurabh Kumar's questions, I think this will require more time to go into details, but many Chinese have talked about it, and they have actually, Deng Xiaoping's famous in 1981 in the larger parties of the, which is now known as the resolution on the 60 years of the CPC. In Mao's Cultural Revolution was given a 70-30 assessment. That speech, Deng Xiaoping had said, the Cultural Revolution is wrong and it was bad, and we must not repeat the Cultural Revolution. Now, the interesting thing is that in this debate, many articles and commentators have pointed out that if the issue settled in the 1980s, then why is it that the ghost or the shadow of the revolution continues to live on? I'll give you just one example, that why even today the party establishment completely keeps its hands off of anything about Cultural Revolution. That in 2011 was the vice president. He had received the visiting vice president of United States of America, who now the presidential candidate Biden, who was then vice president under Obama. And during their conversation, Xi Jinping told him about how Xi Jinping's family had suffered Cultural Revolution. But as the report suggests, the Xi Jinping's interpreter chose not to interpret that to the visiting vice president of America. So that gives you one clue or indication.
Thank you.
That so the question now is, people are saying that to call Cultural Revolution a mistake by Tang of Four or Lin Piao is not enough. Party has to come out openly and declare it a national catastrophe. Only then something can be done to permanently bury the Cultural Revolution or the spectral revolution.
Thank you, Hemant. I think we have just enough time for one final round of questions.
Diaspora question not answered.
Sorry?
Diaspora.
Yeah, diaspora, in fact, there's not much. I was concentrating more on the mainland Chinese debates. And if you see the dossier also which the IC has released, there was some mention that in United States, there was a diaspora WeChat group, which after the Fang Fang controversy has actually shut down because they were completely vertically divided, whether to support or whether to oppose Fang Fang. And there's not, I pay much attention to the diaspora.
Thank you very much. We have exactly about 10 minutes left, and I'd like to use this time for one final round of Ambassador Suresh Goyal, please.
Thank you very much, sir. Hemant, lovely presentation. My question is that I'm seeing this kind of an insecurity in China after a very, very long time. Do you think Xi Jinping is actually feeling insecure of what is now happening in China? And is this insecurity, is it related to the USA or related to somebody actually being able to get the news of Wuhan out? Thank you.
Thank you.
General Chakravarti, please.
Yes, General Chakravarti, very simple question to you, Hemant. I don't know, how long do you think is the time for Fang Fang before she is imprisoned? Being a military man, I think Chinese are being a bit too patient. I don't know if this is, you spoke of culture and literature. I've never seen them so patient. I mean, say it's nice for academics, professors and diplomats. But as a military man, as I know the Chinese, I think it's high time that they would have done something. Not that I'm very happy she's writing.
May I say to the military man that maybe times are changing? Okay, we have time for one more question from Amitav Banik. Hemant, you will have exactly 5 minutes to respond, maximum. Amitav Banik,
yes, sir.
Have a question?
Yes, sir. My question is that one thing, is it signaling this Fang Fang phenomenon? Is it signaling a shift towards democratic process? And the second thing, and free press. And second thing is that what is the scene of the containment outside Wuhan? Can you throw some light on that? Thank you.
Okay, Hemant, 5 minutes, please, before we wind up.
Okay, I'll quickly, since all the 4 questions are actually not directly related to each other, so I'll deal with them one by one very quickly. I'll begin with General Chakravarti's question about patients, etc. I think maybe I am not the right person to answer. In today's, our former Foreign Secretary Vijay Gokhale has written an article exactly on this point. So I think that would be that would suffice as far as I am concerned. And about Prashant's question, I'll combine Prashant's question and Ambassador Goyal's question in the sense that many commentators in China also are saying that now that the kind of triggered by Fang Fang diary has taken, perhaps it would not be too far to say that how will China now behave to the outside world as far as how will China take care of the issues at home. All this will be decided or determined by where the Fang Fang debate ends or how it ends. And about Ambassador Goyal's, of course, many people have started speculating whether it is Fang or Fang or COVID-19 is going to be the Achilles heel for Xi Jinping. I think the kind of panic reaction now, the way the operators has started cracking down upon, especially everybody is called, whoever is raising a question is being under public intelligence. One example, there is a Dr. Chang Wen-hung in Shanghai who is a doctor at the infectious disease hospital, which is operated by Fudan University. And this doctor considered in Shanghai in pillar of strength to fight the epidemic in Shanghai. He's very respected. He has been invited by the Chinese government to give lectures to foreign embassies and diplomats, etc., on COVID-19. he recently gave an interview in which he said that the Chinese should be fed milk and sandwiches instead of rice porridge for breakfast because milk and sandwiches have more nutritional value. Can you believe he has become the target of attack by the nationalist mob? And he has actually earned the distinct honor, along with Fang Fang, being the only second person under attack against whom the Cultural Revolution style big character posters have come up all over India. And he has been accused, for example, one blogger accused him of that his bones are filled with Western values. He's the biggest traitor we have today. So that is what I meant by battle of ideas. That now the party orthodoxy or the party establishment, I think their enemy is very clear. That it is the freedom or the openness of the social media which has given this power or which has given this voice to the millions of educated netizens in China, who believe in what Dr. Li Wenliang said, that if a society has only one voice, then that society is not healthy. That is the fear which is now gripping the Chinese community. Whether it will become at least a teaching thing or not, I think it will be determined by whether the Chinese Communist Party...
Mute your microphones, please. Sorry.
Whether the Chinese Communist Party is to contain this homegrown, bred Fang Fang virus quickly or not.
Hemant, have you responded to all the questions?
About the democratic process, Amitabh's last question, I think those of us who participated, the Chinese professor Taoi's lecture 2 weeks ago, he was asked a question whether China is an illiberal society. And I think he said very openly that he will not call China liberal or illiberal society. He will call China a hybrid society where they are trying to come together with the traditional Chinese values and thoughts and the communist past in heritage and the best out of the Western values and move forward. I think I'll go by what Dr. Tawi said. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hemant. You have really, in the space of some 75 minutes, you have covered a huge canvas, both in terms of fine detail, as well as the larger images and the larger questions that must resonate with us. Some of these are issues to which a definitive answer is surely not possible. But the huge difference between 1989 and 2020 is the fact that we are a connected world, an online world, an internet-enabled world. Just imagine what might have happened in 1989 if the internet phenomenon had existed at that time. So clearly, we are in for very complex times. General Chakravarti asked a question which I thought was very interesting, that why is so much leeway being given to Fang Fang? It is, and I think you have brought up this point very, very cogently, it is being given because that is the nature of society today, and that no authoritarian regime or quasi-liberal or illiberal, whatever label we want to use, cannot use the old methods of suppression. This famous great Chinese internet firewall doesn't exist anymore. It has so many holes and percolations in it that, in fact, everything more or less gets through. If I can make a prediction, don't be surprised if Fang Fang ends up with a Nobel Prize. So this China that did not get a Nobel for Lucian, the India that did not get a Nobel for its great contemporary of Lucian, you know I refer to Munshi Premchand, will finally receive a Nobel. Thank you very, very much indeed, Hemant. Thanks to ICS, thanks to the print, to Jyoti Malhotra particularly, and of course to Ashok Kant, the assiduous and the ever energetic director of ICS. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you everyone and goodbye.